Hi everyone, how are you? So I'm doing this live to advertise. I'm going to do three things. One, advertise my upcoming astrology course, a beginner astrology class I'm teaching for those who are interested. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about archetypes in the shadow because I found a really good definition that I think it might interest you, in particular, relating to Megan's podcast a little bit. And lastly, I'm going to be talking about the Matthias Desmond mass formation. I'm no longer going to be advocating for him after seeing this video that I will share with you in this um, live report I'm doing. So I told you all I would come on here and, you know, um, announce when on September 1st, which is today. Can't believe the summer's almost over here in the Northern Hemisphere, but it's back to school, back to work, and back to class. And so there was an interest from many people who wanted a beginner astrology class. So I am offering one via my Patreon account, which I will also link below after the end of this. And it will be covering beginner topics here. So if you're an advanced person, you're probably not going to be interested unless you want to come in and socialize a bit. It's going to be a live chat thing. So you can, discuss things and make comparisons and ask questions and all that. It's not, I want to be fun, a group experience, class experience, right? So we'll be doing the usual signs, planets, houses, hemisphere emphasis, elements, planetary patterns, and more. And we'll go at whatever pace is best for everyone to make sure that everyone gets something out of it and it inspires you to learn more and more because, of course, astrology is such a vast topic and one where you spend a lifetime learning it. You're always a student. Even William Lilly, famous Hori astrologer, called himself a student of astrology, even after achieving world fame for his predictions. You never feel like a master of this topic. You're always the student. We're always a student of astrology. So yeah, so if you want to have some fun, take a beginner class again, my Patreon page, patreon.com/astro and tarot. This is on my community tab. You can click on it there too. And we're going to start Sunday evening at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. So that is that. So that is the class coming up. Hopefully you can see that. I've got to pull up this video and make sure that I can see what you're seeing. My setup here. Yeah, if you have any questions about it, feel free to ask. I think that pretty much covers what I can think of saying for the class. Probably be about an hour long. Yeah, about an hour. An hour is a good amount of time there. After an hour, you're pretty exhausted going over information. So yeah, a good amount of time there. I'll do it once a week on Sunday evenings is the plan for right now. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can ask about the class or anything, you can ask them below. Patreon, I waited, charges once a month, so it'll be $20 a month. Yeah, so for astrology classes, and you also get tarot reading with that. So if you're a $5 or $10 member on Patreon, the first of the month is the time to sign up because that's when they charge. They charge once a month on the first, the Patreon system, anyway, the way it works. I don't have any control over it. It's how they do it. So yeah, all right. So astrology class, I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think we'll generate a lot of topics. And of course, we'll look at royal family members and of course, Harry and Meghan. Never forget them. We'll be talking about their charts. And I think you'll find it very interesting. All right. So that's all I can think of saying for now about the astrology class. Other thing I want to talk about is about the tarot, the shadow in the tarot. So this book, awesome book here, gives the best description. Now, I've tried to read a lot, trying to figure out the shadow, and just in Jungian shadow and archetypes and all. And a lot of times trying to read Carl Jung, if you're not a psychologist or a psychology student, it's a lot to try to digest, which is why I appreciate this book so much, which I was just starting to read here by Christine Setti, Tarot Shadow Work. Awesome, awesome book. Now, she's a very intelligent woman and she explains it perfectly for the lay person like myself. But she goes into everything about, oops, I just made a line there by accident, into the shadow. So she talks about the shadow and archetypes. And she does it in a very conversational, friendly, it's not trying to read a textbook here or, a stuffy, book. It's very much easy to digest and so important because this is such an important topic that many people are interested in. And um, I was thinking, Megan's podcast should have been called Shadow Work. That's what she's doing. She's trying to do the archetypes, but she's really projecting her shadow all over the place, possibly is what I'm thinking. Yeah, because she talks about let's go a little ahead here. Springing up with the dead psychiatrist, talking about Carl Jung and how Carl Jung is brought up tarot. And he said he didn't write much about tarot, but he was interested in all kinds of divination work and how it affected the mind, the psychology of people, and how it revealed our unconscious. And Carl Jung said, quote, "The image series of tarot cards were descendants of the archetypes of transformation." So she writes, brief as this one statement, it sparked a mountain of tarot commentary, right? So yeah, so Carl Jung discussed archetypes with tarot. So this is definitely uh, nothing new, and it's a fascinating topic as well. So here we go. So Carl Jung and the shadow. So, in his book, Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, Jung defined collective unconscious as the aspect of the unconscious shared by all human beings. It is inherited, a transpersonal residue of evolution occurring across a variety of social settings. The collective unconscious is not dependent on a single specific social circumstance or its emergence. And then she goes on here, I'll highlight this part. The components of the collective unconscious are called archetypes, sometimes referred to as patterns of behavior. Archetypes are an essential part of our awareness, capable of illuminating our unconscious behavior if we allow them. They represent the positive and negative qualities within us. Archetypes form the basis of religion, legend, fairy tales, and are defined by the culture from which they arise, while their concepts are universal. Oops. The central archetype is the self, the unifying force at the core of our personality, pushing us towards wholeness. Jung's other archetypes include anima, the female principle, and animus, the masculine character in all of us. So we all have an anima and an animus. And we also have heroes and villains and wicked stepmothers and beautiful princesses and vamps and vampires, folk tradition throughout the world. So I found this, and of course, there's the mother archetype as well. So I found it interesting. I'm looking, I'm like, isn't that interesting? We got all these different archetypes. Megan's naming her podcast Archetypes. And, she's basically tapping in to a bunch of different archetypes, right? I mean, she seems to have made a career out of tapping into as many archetypes as possible. I mean, she was the princess archetype, and then she's the victim archetype, and then of course Harry's, Princess Diana, the mother archetype. Harry's afraid history is going to repeat itself, right? So Megan is just like tapping into all these archetypes, and I don't think it's accidental. And I think PR, of course, is very well versed on these things as well. So don't think PR and doesn't know all about these all about the shadows and archetypes and all that. So found that very interesting. I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? Megan's got right when Megan first married Harry, when the big wedding is all big hurrah, and oh, isn't that wonderful? They're marrying, American marrying to the royal family, a biracial American. It was like you couldn't say anything bad about her. And then all these little books came out for children. I went to the library, and boom! I mean, think about it. Okay, just real quick, Harry and Meghan pushed Harry to propose to her after the magazine cover she did in September. I forget the name of the magazine again. Vanity Fair? Yeah, it was the Vanity Fair one. So that was in September. So that blew up their relationship in the PR, which she was not supposed to do. And then after that, the pressure started building. So Harry proposed to her at the end of November 2017. And they got married only 5, 6 months later. It was like boom, 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 boom. Right? It was like fast. And it even as fast as that was, as pressure as was, even at the time of her wedding, there were like 4 or 5 children's books out about, "Oh, American Princess, Meghan, the American Princess." It was all and it was really gearing it towards children, right? They didn't come out with the adult books because the adults wanna know what the real story was, and that would take some research, right? So, Lady Colin Campbell and Tom Bower would come out later, but they quickly came out with these archetypal books of, "Oh, look, a princess," our first black princess kind of archetype that Megan was pushing with her PR is what I'm getting at. So I do think that her PR rely heavily on these archetypes and the shadows. So yeah, this book, I highly recommend this book. Um, and archetypes are embodiments of figures like mother, which are universal and immediate and recognize deep within us. These universal symbols. Of all of these, Jung believed the most powerful archetype to be is the shadow. Da-dum. So now he gets the other type. The shadow contains, this is why I think her podcast should have been called Shadows. The shadow contains the darker aspects of our character that have remained undeveloped because they have not been given expression. Jung suggested that these undeveloped feelings, ideas, and desires were animal instincts passed along in evolution, representing the negative sides of our psyches. If neglected, the shadow will rule us. So powerful is the shadow, Jung wrote, that if it's not attended to, i.e., made conscious, it will appear in the world around us as our fate. Boom. I mean, this is such this is so well written, this book. It's so great. So the collective versus the personal shadow. So you have like the shadow of the whole society and how that plays out. And he brings out Hitler's soldiers exterminating millions of Jews, and Protestant Catholics killing each other in Ireland. Because this is what the Jung said. Okay, let me start from the beginning. Jung divided the darker aspects of our personality into 2 types: the collective shadow and the personal shadow. The collective shadow is made of negative traits held by races of people or countries as a whole and projected onto a minority group or nation. So Hitler's soldiers and the Protestants, Catholics in Ireland are 2 examples of the collective shadow at work in the world. The study of the collective shadow and its place in human history could fill several libraries. However, exclusive focus on the tarot shadow work is the personal shadow. Yeah, so you can look at your personal shadow with the tarot deck because they are archetypes. The cards are archetypes. So yeah, so I just want to point that out. It's a really good book. It goes into me, my shadow. And let me see where is the one last part I wanted to read here? Oh, it says Jung once told a friend that he would rather be whole than wholly good, and a personal shadow blocks the creative, compassion, and aspects of our personalities. So yes, to be healthy and whole, you should work on identifying your shadows. And one of the ways of doing that is seeing traits that you dislike in someone else but not yourself is called projection. Jung suggested that we could find the shadow in our slips of the tongue, humor. So, slips of the tongue, what did you mean to say? Or humor, did you laugh at a racial, cultural, or sexual joke? Dreams, daydreams, and fantasies. Have you plotted to murder your mother in law or boss lately? Concrete examples of the shadow include self destructive behaviors, addiction, eating disorders, depression. So this is if you don't integrate your shadow, this is what can happen. You get self-destructive. So and there's drug addictions, right, which Harry and Meghan allegedly have, depression, anxiety disorders, shame, right, destructive behaviors towards others, verbal, physical, or sexual abuse, and stealing, lying, marital affairs, blaming, envy, betrayal. So these are all manifestations if you don't work out your shadows. Your shadow, I should say. Or shadows, I guess we have multiple shadows. So that's what happens. So this can kind of explain why Meghan is the way she is towards it, and Harry attacking the royal family, constantly trying to compare themselves, trying to be better than everybody in the royal family, et cetera, et cetera. Playing the victims all the time. Poor us, poor us. It says, the more we fight to suppress our shadow, the more it controls us. Jung said that suppression of the shadow was akin to beheading for a headache. He wrote, if an inferiority is conscious, one always has the chance to correct it. But if it is repressed and isolated from the consciousness, it never gets corrected. Yeah, so very interesting stuff here. Very, you know, illuminating here. She illuminates the shadow. Highly recommend this book. So I just thought I'd put that out there. And I was, just thinking about these archetypes and how Megan's seems to be trying to manifest herself in all these archetypes that she seems to be trying to tap into in the collective conscious or the collective unconscious. I thought that was interesting. And one last thing, I've been pushing. I'm gonna go to the mass formation by Matthias Desmond, which at first I was really impressed by and thought, yeah, explains what happened here. But now I listened to this podcast by Dr. Bregan who's a very, very prominent psychiatrist who's been battling with big pharma and the government for years over what they've been doing to people. And he's a major figure in this prominent, he's a pillar, should we say, of the psychiatric community, and 86 years old. And he's with here talking to what's her name again? Her name's slipping my Catherine Austin Fitz, who's also, if you're familiar, very very prominent financial advisor and they're both exposing all of this, what's going on today. Well, anyways, they're talking about this mass formation book by Matthias Desmond that he just came out with. And they're pointing out that, okay, to a certain extent, his theory fits, but Matthias Desmond's advice appears to be like, oh, don't do anything about it, just accept the new way of things are. And so they're suggesting, or they suspect, or they believe, that based on Matthias Desmond's theories, which Dr. Bregan is not impressed with, and he said they think that Matthias, to get to the point, they think Matthias Desmond is like a globalist puppet. Like he's there to lead people towards the new world order, towards a globalist totalitarian agenda, and he's just doing it in a way to make it, it seem like it's a good thing. So they're saying that they do not agree with this whole mass formation psychosis theory of Matthias Desmond, and they believe that he works for them. And they criticize the psychiatrist, Dr. Bregan, criticizes his psychoanalytic theory there. He basically said it's all crap. So let's get to the point. He said they're saying Matthias Desmond is full of it, basically, and he's a puppet of Klaus Schwab or in the World Economic Forum, so not to listen to him. So I am not going to be advocating for Matthias Desmond anytime more because I respect Catherine Austin Fitts and Dr. Bregan, a lot more in her. So I just wanted to mention that because I have talked about it in the past. But anyways, I highly recommend them, and I also highly recommend this book, and of course anything by Dr. Young. And that is what I have for you today. So again, astrology class starting this Sunday, September 7th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can sign on through my Patreon there. So thank you all for listening, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.